Okay, there's another newsmaker joining us in a moment, Omar Abdullah, the Chief Minister of Jammu and Kashmir, because our other big story here on the news today at 9, the fragile peace in the Kashmir Valley shattered last night by 2 civilian deaths. The latest trigger of those deaths in Budgam has meant that the army is once again under the scanner, even as the police in the valley claims it is yet to find any evidence to suggest that those shot dead were terrorists.
Valley a day after killing of 2 youths in army firing. Tension, twin probes and a frantic search for the truth. A curfew was clamped down, but order never restored. Army was put in the dock and also leading a probe post-haste.
On the other side of this barricade, as you can see, hundreds of people queuing up and continuously clashing with the police force here. Look at these people, they're pelting stones, and the police force also has to use the tear gas smoke shells to disperse these locals from this place.
Just like the streets, the politics was also on the boil.
These boys were no militants, they did not fire. Even if the army had to stop the car, they could have, fired at the tires and stopped the vehicle and seen who was inside.
Omar tweeted his anger, claiming the deaths had vitiated the whole atmosphere. The defense minister tweeted back saying that guilty won't be spared. The key to the puzzle is this vehicle. Army questioned the Jawans for second day, took them to the crime scene, and now wants more details about this car involved in the incident. Despite the FIR against the 53 Rashtriya Rifles, Army claims the occupants did not stop when ordered to at a checkpoint. But cops claim that there was no reason to fire to kill. With Shujaul Haq in Srinagar, Bureau Report, Headlines Today.
And a short while ago, I spoke to the Chief Minister of Jammu and Kashmir, Omar Abdullah. I began by asking him how he saw the army action. Would it only widen the sense of alienation and anxiety that the people of the valley felt towards the army at a time when the army had earned much goodwill during flood relief? Listen in to his answer.
Friends by actions like this. Whatever good the army has done in terms of all the flood rescue and relief, in terms of clearing Tosa Maidan of mines and unexploded bombs, of their operation Sadbhavna and the medical camps and all the other good operations that they do, all of it comes to nothing the moment you have an incident like this where seemingly on the face of it innocent civilians have been shot.
But the question that Omar that comes to me is that every time such an incident happens, it seems that the entire army is branded as somehow being anti-valley, anti-people. The army only engages in human rights abuses. The truth is, of course, Omar, more complex. And the truth is that individuals may have committed an act which deserves punishment, but why brand the entire army?
Unfortunately, Rajdeep, people, as much as we'd like to convince people that this is a one-off, a stray incident, etc., etc., let's face it, one politician does a bad thing, people end up damning the whole class of politicians. And the same is true in organizations like this. You have one bad police officer and suddenly everybody thinks that every police officer is bad. Recently your channel highlighted an aberration amongst one of our police officers who seemed to king size, so to speak, and the entire police force got damned. The same thing happens here. I understand that by and large the army has been very careful in terms of upholding human rights and in ensuring that there is no collateral damage. But the moment an incident like this takes place, all the past incidents get dragged up. I mean, everybody wants to ask, okay, what happened about Pathribal, what happened about Matsil, what happened about ABCD, and then suddenly everything gets reopened. So yes, I take your point that not everybody is to be held responsible for this, but it's difficult to convince people of that.
You know, let me tell you the other worry that one has. One, it's just on the eve of elections, important elections taking place in Jammu and Kashmir. Do you believe that incidents like this will now only be used by separatist groups to try and tar the entire election process, to somehow or the other try and get people not to join the electoral process? Is that a worry that this is coming at the time that it does?
Well, I mean, whether we like it or not, the Indian Army, Indian security forces are a representation of the country as a whole, as are we elected representatives. I mean, when we do something wrong, we are held up as representative of the Indian state, and the same is true for the army, the paramilitary forces and the police. So, I mean, that's bound to happen. Now, your original question was, is this going to be used to vitiate the atmosphere given the proximity of the assembly elections? Absolutely, of course it will. I mean, if I was a separatist leader, I'd be rubbing my hands in glee because this is exactly the sort of incident I want on the basis of which I will spearhead my election boycott campaign. Please understand, as it is, there is less than optimum enthusiasm about this elections because of the floods, and this just aggravates things.
You know, the solution then, you mentioned Pathribal, and we've seen in the past when previous incidents like this have taken place, there's a feeling that the army inquiry has perhaps been less than transparent and often not been as swift as it should be. Do you believe that's the only solution that will convince people? If the inquiry is transparent and if it is swift and punishment is given to those who are responsible for killing innocent civilians?
Those are the only points I made to the Union Defence Minister today when I spoke to him. That given that they have stepped forward and ordered an inquiry, it has to be done in a time-bound manner. And if somebody is held responsible, then swift action must follow. There is no other way of winning people's confidence. I mean, the fact that the army has sanctioned a court-martial in the case of the Matsil custodial killings. Now, action must follow, and those who are responsible must be held to account. Otherwise, we will, as it is, we have lost so much of the confidence of the people. We will not be able to regain it, no matter how much we try.
You know, let me point out another worry. Here is, and I said it earlier, that the army has earned a lot of goodwill for its work in the flood relief. Am I to be told that this one incident means that all that the army did in the past is all going to be forgotten? Will the people of the valley recognize the important role that the army played during that critical period?
Look, Rajdeep, we'll have to see. I mean, clearly this incident has angered people, and public memories are what they are. You remember the most recent incident. I wish people would, I mean, look at it. I am being held to account not for 6 years of governance, but for 3 months of the floods and post-flood situation. So if it will happen with me, it will happen with everybody. We are only as good as our most recent incident or our most recent operation. So as much as I'd like to believe that people will still be very forthcoming in their praise for the army assistance during the floods, I'm sorry, but unfortunately, this is what will cloud people's judgments.
You know, I also wanted to reflect on one other point, which is that leaders like yours, like yourself, major party in the valley, have often also spoken out against the army. You've spoken out against human rights abuses. You've spoken about the need to revoke AFSPA, the Armed Forces Special Powers Act. How does all that fit in, particularly at election time? Is this the kind of rhetoric now that I'm going to see from politicians in the valley, anti-army rhetoric as a result of this one incident?
Look, I mean, as much as I'd like to give the simplistic answer and say, yes, everything lies in the partial revocation of AFSPA, it's not as simple as that. We have to ensure that incidents like this don't take place. And I'm sorry, but there have to be better ways of stopping a car that's trying to break through a checkpost. I mean, firing cannot be the only solution. There are portable spikes that can be used to slash tires. Why has nobody thought of that? I mean, these are army checkposts, and therefore they need to think of these things. It's not for the police or others to do it. But I mean, we've seen it the world over. They use these portable spikes which they spread across the road, they slash tires, and the car comes to a halt. You don't have to open fire. So if that is acceptable everywhere else in the world, why not here in Jammu and Kashmir? I mean, these are small things, but they will go a long way towards making a difference. The biggest healing touch is to ensure that we learn lessons from incidents like this and make sure they don't happen again. AFSPA, yes, of course, it's something that I've been pressing for, and I must say incidents like this only strengthen the case for its revocation.
You know, let me though look at it. You're saying that the car broke the that the army could have reacted better to the incident. Let me flip it around. That here is the army in a very fragile situation. Who knows, tomorrow someone who breaks the checkpost could well be a militant who could fire on the army. The army is always on the edge given the situation as it exists in the valley at the moment, Omar. So given that situation, do you also have some sympathy or empathy at all for the armed forces who are dealing with militancy in these fragile situations?
I'm absolutely willing to look at it from an army man's point of view. If fire had been opened from this vehicle as it escaped through the checkpost, I would have absolutely no problems with the army returning fire. But please understand, this is a vehicle that went through a checkpost, but no fire was opened. There was no hostile fire directed towards the security forces. And therefore, what's to stop you from wirelessing ahead and trying to block this car off at a future point? Or the point I'm making, what is to stop us from investing in these small spike strips that can be used to slash tires? And therefore, if there are militants in that car, once the car comes to a halt, I'm sure there are better ways of dealing with it.
Okay. Omar Abdullah, I know you are a busy man at the moment with elections, and I know that this incident has once again troubled the fragile peace in the valley. I appreciate your joining us and giving us your perspective. Hopefully, punishment will be swift. That's what one expects. Swift punishment in this case against the guilty army men.